Let's take a look at the other side of the coin. The guys who are underrated. They're very good at real life basketball, but their fantasy impact is not the same. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed. Michael, never be late like that again. You need to be
You
on
are
time.
Locked On Fantasy Basketball.
We run a
your
tight ship
daily
here.
fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and we bring the boom every afternoon on your FYP. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We are available on all platforms. So this show is being recorded the 3rd of July at 7 p.m. Eastern. Just for reference, you are not seeing it until a week later. Summer League is just about to start. Tomorrow, I believe it starts. I will be there. Stay tuned to my socials, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, TikToks, and I'll do little short stuff while I'm over there. And then when I get back, full recap of Summer League. Just so you know where we're at. And hopefully, I'm looking a little bit more sun-kissed, a little bit fresher versus the literal freezing temperature that I'm dealing with in Melbourne at the moment. So, that's where I am at the moment, but not where I am when I'm recording this. This is a companion piece to yesterday's show where I told you the players that are bad that put up good fantasy numbers. And all the same caveats apply here. When we talk about guys that are underrated, which is the title of the show, well, I'll stick it up now. Guys that are great in real life but bad at fantasy, we don't always mean bad. These are players that will have value. These are players who can be draftable, and some of them are draftable, some of them aren't. Some of them will become better players in the future, all that sort of stuff. But these are guys whose impact stats, whose overall basketball real-life production doesn't match up the idea of their value in the NBA or the way that front offices or teams would view them versus how we would view them in fantasy. I think it's a relatively simple concept. It's probably going to get less people getting angry at it versus me telling you that someone's bad when you actually think they're great. This is me telling you, hey, this guy's good, but his fantasy numbers don't really add up. Yes? Good. Let's get into that. Let's start straight away. And this guy now has only become good since he has left Canada and Toronto, and that's OG Anunoby. That's how you become good. You leave Toronto, really simple. OG has always been awesome, let's be honest. He's been a player that came back really early from an ACL tear coming out of college. Has had some issues or some concerns at times with offensive contributions, but has really sort of settled into his role. There's always been some whispers, or recently anyway, of wanting a bigger offensive role, but that's just never really going to be him. He can be a little spotty with his shooting, but he's not terrible. He's actually usually pretty good. He's someone whose passing is okay. His defensive impact is unbelievable. Despite the injuries that he has had, and he had that weird elbow thing all season, and had some struggles earlier in the year in Toronto, but are there three guys that you would prefer out guarding on the perimeter than OG? Probably not. Like, he's better than his new teammate, Mikal Bridges, I think. Is he better than like a Lou Dort, who's widely seen as a good perimeter defender? Yeah, I think he very comfortably is. I think he's up there. Unless there's someone I'm just missing, like, he might be the best perimeter defender in the NBA. He can play center. He can guard centers. We saw him do it against Joel Embiid in the playoffs. He can guard point guards. We've seen him do that before. He can hit clutch shots. Is not to say that he's bad in fantasy. His -1 rank was 98th per game. His points rank was 117th. And he's been better in fantasy. Look, he has had some top 60-ish seasons. If you incorrectly view things and look at turnovers, then he'll be like a top 40 or top 50 guy he's been in the past. But his actual on-court impact is consistently way better than that. His EPM this last season ranked him 35th in the NBA, and I would say this was a down season from Anunoby. His DPM lists him at 30. Remember, DPM is Darko plus minus, a number which takes into past production, box score numbers, on-off plus minus impact, decays it down. but also is used to look forward. So it's a projection. 30th. And drip, which is another impact stat that updates daily, used to look at a player's, not necessarily all their past production, not a gigantic future look forward, but somewhat of a look forward. It's more about where we're at right now. Not what you've done the last 3 months, but like what is the value of a player right now. He doesn't come in quite as high on drip, OG, 74th. But all of that stuff, especially the 2 top 40 finishes there, top 35 finishes in those impact stats, and the fact that he just got a 5-year, $200 million plus contract, suggests that he's ridiculously impactful and all teams want him. But for fantasy, we're not touching him in round 2, 3, 4, 5 probably. Like I said, 98th in -1, 117th in points leagues. And now he's on this Knicks team with Randall, Brunson, Bridges. There's Hart, DiVincenzo. There's a lot of guys. Like you're not going to touch him in the top 75, I wouldn't have thought. But he's awesome. And that value, like if we could capture in fantasy, which we can't, and that's the nature of the game. We understand the way that all that stuff works. Like if we could capture this impact, like he'd be a very high top-level player. And I'm going to go back to this guy because he was the thumbnail picture for my overrated show yesterday. But like Vooch was, 40th in points leagues and 50th in category leagues? And OG is 98th and 117th. If one person in these comments argues that they would prefer Vooch on their team, real life, not fantasy, if they would prefer Vooch on their team, well, I will raise funds for new eyes. I go simple as that. OG, underrated for fantasy, beast in real life. You might think overpaid, and I understand that, but beast in real life. Today's episode brought to you by eBay Motors. I'm not sure if you're aware of the 3 ingredients for championships according to eBay Motors, but they are, I'm not even going to say them in order. I'm going to throw you off. So you go, wow, what are you talking about, Josh? It's patience, it's passion, and it's drive. That's what leads you to championships. And eBay Motors has all of those things. And when they say drive, they don't mean, brum brum. Well, they do because it's about cars, but they're talking about that will. And that's where we use double entendre. eBay Motors has everything that you need. Over 122 million parts for your car. Well, not for your car, for everybody's car. Because a car doesn't need 122 million parts, but they're all there. Just in case you had 122 million cars, you could find all those parts available on eBay Motors. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, you are guaranteed that part is going to fit your car. Or if it doesn't, you get your money back. eBay Motors has the parts that you need, the prices you want. It is all there. Simple stuff. And it's your number one ride or die, of course. We know that as well. We're going to get our car's name tattooed right across our heart. I've already done that. So I want you to all follow suit. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to US customers. I wonder if it counts that when I'm in the US, I can use eBay Guaranteed Fit and eBay Motors and get some parts and bring them home in the suitcase. Not sure that's fair use of the eBay Guaranteed Fit, but, sometimes we have to try and do whatever we can for our number one ride or die. Let us talk about the next player. And there are going to be very common themes here. We are not fantastic in really most sports, NBA being one of them, of evaluating and quantifying defense. It is not very easy. We have gotten better and better and better at it. We've got a bunch of advanced different metrics. One thing, if you are ever going to talk about defense, defensive rating is not an individual stat. Don't use this player's got a defensive rating of 106, not a defensive stat. You can use on-off, you can use percentage of shots, field goals contested at the rim. Even one-on-one matchup data is pretty rough for defense. But when we use longer sample stuff of on-off, of defensive event generation, of all of that sort of thing, we tend to get an idea of a player's defensive worth. We are still trying to work at it, and basketball is a tough sport to do it because of schemes, because of double teams, because of the moving nature of it. And it is hard to quantify. Defense is not steals, it's not blocks. It can be, but it's not always. But we are getting better at it. But you'll see most of the traditional box scores don't really tie into that. And that's where fantasy basketball is born and bred. Bred? Why did I speak like that? But that doesn't matter. So when we talk about these guys who are underrated, a lot of it is going to be because they play amazing roles defensively, positionally, spacing-wise, cutting-wise, the things that don't show up in the traditional box scores. And that's how we can sort of get the idea of who these players are. So let's just go straight to our favorite team, the Orlando Magic. Because Jalen Suggs needs recognition. Now, I don't even know how to clarify how I thought of Jalen Suggs in the draft. Initially, at the start of that draft process, 2021, Suggs was considered the number 1 overall pick contender. I didn't have him at number 1. In the end, I had him at number 4, ahead of Scotty Barnes, and I widely criticized Masai Ujiri for not taking Suggs in that spot. And obviously, that was wrong. Barnes has turned in, so far, through the 3 years of their careers, Barnes has been the better player, without any question. Suggs' first 2 years were a real struggle. Barnes' second year was a struggle. Fine. Barnes has been way better. But the idea that Suggs was a bust at pick number 5, I think that we've moved on from that. Because he was awesome. Believe he was all defense second team last season. Rightfully so. But for fantasy, he was borderline. 119th in -1 rankings, 143 in points. He played so balls out that he felt like he got injured every 5 seconds. And we go to the locker room and then come back later in the game. His minutes were not particularly high, but towards the end of the year, they lent into Jalen Suggs being, the Orlando Magic that is, they lent into him being their starting point guard, when for most of the year, he was playing as a shooting guard next to either Markelle Fultz or Mr. Black, or Cole Anthony, not even Cole Anthony, because he never even started. But in the end, they just said, well, Suggs, you're our point guard, and Gaz Harris, you're our shooting guard, and we've seen their off-season moves. Well, it's Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. So Suggs is 100% their point guard now. Like, I don't really see what else they're going to be doing. Like I said, he played only 27 minutes a night, which is the same amount of minutes that he played as a rookie. He played 75 games and started all 75 games. He averaged only 13 points. But he went from a 21% shooter as a rookie from 3, which is horrific, obviously, in that many minutes, to shooting 40% from 3. These are crazy step-ups. Like, they are big, big jumps forward for what Suggs was able to do. And again, for fantasy, he does generate steals at a pretty strong rate. But that was, there's not a lot else that he's really giving. That 1.4 steals is fine, 0.6 blocks is fine. And what is very weird about his numbers in his career, he started as a rookie, 1.2 steals and 0.4 blocks. And then he went to 1.3 steals and 0.5 blocks. And then he went to 1.4 steals and 0.6 blocks. So steals and blocks jumped by 0.1 every season, which is a little weird. But he turned into an efficient player who's an okay passer, but he's not a traditional point guard at all. In fact, his assist numbers dropped significantly from being a rookie to a third-year player, as Franz and Paolo did a lot of that. But his impact is crazy. 37th in EPM, 69th on DPM, and 40th on drip. That's a top 50 NBA player as a general sort of idea between those numbers. And for fantasy, he's nowhere near that because he's 27 minutes a night. He's low volume. He's low assists. And that just doesn't bring it for fantasy. That's not that good. And I'm not sure. Yeah, he will probably be able to, maybe, we'll see, because they're still going to have Anthony and Black. And, that wasn't just Anthony Black. That's Cole Anthony and Mr. Black. Don't know what's happening with the Fultz at the time I'm recording this. But they're still going to have those guys. So maybe he just sits at a 28-minute-a-night player without low usage, low assists, and just does wrecking stuff defensively. He's also a really weird player in that his home and road splits are vastly different. True shooting at home, 62. True shooting on the road, under 58. Plus minus at home, plus 8.4. Plus minus on the road, negative 6.7. 14 points at home, 11 points on the road. 3.1 assists, 2.4 assists. 41 from 3, 38 from 3. Like, they're big differences. And it was 38 games versus 37 games, same playing time. Got to the line 91 times at home, 65 on the road. He's a big energy guy, fuels the crowd, fuels the team. The Magic were very good at home, and he's a large reason for that. So, one of the best players in the NBA that nobody talks about, and again, I know that sounds hyperbolic, but he was. If you can be a top 75 NBA player, you are ridiculously good. And if you can be top 50 or top 40, yeah, that's a very good player. It's a very good player. And that's where he is. But he's never going to be someone we consider anywhere near that from a fantasy point of view. Let's talk about his teammate, someone whose fantasy production... I could have had I could have had a million Magic guys in here. Goga Bitadze was someone I considered. Franz Wagner's impact stats were all like top 30, top 40. Didn't put him in here. I am putting Wendell Carter Jr. in here because he was drafted around that 80-90 zone and he was very disappointing early in the season. Couldn't hit a shot ever. There was a lot of talk from people in the fantasy community, analysts, but mainly like users that, well, Wendell's not getting the starting job back. They're just going to run with Goga. Of course, that didn't happen. And Goga was pushed out of the rotation. And honestly, me talking right now about Wendell Carter and the Magic might sound completely stupid because there has been whispers, them bringing back Isaac, Wagner, and Bitadze, that maybe Wendell is moved and maybe the Pelicans give up something to get him in there. Maybe the Knicks give up something to make him their starting center. He is a little undersized, Wendell. He's had a weird career. He used to be a very good shot blocker, decent passer and three-point shooter. Old mate Jim Boylan, the egghead himself, killed a lot of that. He started to bring some of it back, but he's sort of stuck in the middle of where he is as a player. But what he is, and what he has been relatively consistently, Wendell, is a really strong impact player. He was 174th in fantasy, -1, 149th on points leagues. I don't think we're touching him at all for 12-team leagues next year. If everything remains as it is, I don't think we're touching any of that. Just looking on dunks and threes, and they've got like a projected depth chart here. Oh, it's the old one because they don't have KCP there. But they've got Carter at the 4, Goga at center, Paolo at the 3, Wagner at the 2, and Suggs at the 1. That's not what's... That's. I don't think that ever happened last year. But anyway, Carter was the 62nd ranked player in EPM. You might say, well, that's because the Magic, which is good this year, Josh, so rising tide lifts all boats. Yeah, I guess so, but he was 72nd best player in EPM the year before and 48th in EPM the year before that. So he was good all the way through. Like, he was just great. They are super strong numbers overall for old mate Wendell. But for fantasy, it's nothing much there. He is not a good shot blocker. He's not a steals guy. Wait, I mean, that's not true. I think he can be a good shot blocker. I think he can be a decent passer, but he doesn't do that anymore. He shot 37% from 3, but his mid-range or his rim finishing numbers dropped way down. After a slow start, his efficiency did catch back up, but what he is just a guy that just gets stuff done. Continually gets stuff done. And that doesn't mean we do not want to touch him in fantasy in a situation where, honestly, he might be a perfect fit next to Zion. As long as he starts to bring some of that rim protection back, because it's not there. Like it's nowhere near where it used to be. So he used to be a good shot blocker in college. But I believe he played with, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he played next to Marvin Bagley at Duke and had some really strong block numbers and had strong block numbers for the Bulls as well. But that's all sort of that's all disappeared in Orlando, or after Jim Boylan screwed him up. 62nd on EPM, 101st on DPM, 65th on drip. That is a very, very strong starter. Top 100, top 75 player. Defensively, without even putting up big numbers, which is again a theme. Not huge defensive stats, but just is good at it. Just is good at defense. He's ranked as the 47th ranked player on DPM for defense. Defensive EPM is what I'm trying to say. For drip, drip was a 1.0 on his on the defensive drip. Like, these are all strong numbers. I don't know what his Darko, what's his name was off the top of my head. But Wendell, a guy that we don't really think of as being a really super impactful player. And even last year, I think if I asked you, you'd say he's pretty disappointing. The Magic probably need to go in a different direction. Well, he was still really good. He was still really, really good. Today's episode is also brought to you by BetterHelp. You've heard the saying, or maybe you haven't, and I'll introduce it to you. Comparison is the thief of joy. You might sit there on your phone, social media, TikTok, Instagram, one of the worst offenders for this, and look at your favorite influencer / idiot with no real job and go, man, look at the life they're living. Look at me sitting here being dumb, and they're out here with their luxury houses and pools, which so much of it's fake. They'll like rent a house, go there and go, look at everything, how good it looks. Puts them up. They get the dopamine on the likes. You sit there feeling terrible. Enjoy what you have, not what you think somebody else has. BetterHelp and therapy is something that can help you refocus where you need to be. Because we don't need to be looking at those things and being jealous and thinking that we aren't good enough to be in that position. So if you are thinking about starting therapy and some of these things resonate with you, give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp is entirely online. It's suited to your schedule. You can do it whenever you want, whenever you need to. And if you don't find that connection with your therapist, well, you can change your therapist free of charge. So stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. Okay. This one here is one of the ones, again, that is a very big ball, Aaron. Aaron Gordon. Aaron Gordon, it's a really heavily themed Orlando Magic show, isn't it? Gordon obviously played for Orlando, number 4 overall draft pick. I think it was 4. And they tried to like make him into a number 1 offensive guy, and it didn't really work. Like he had some moments, but it didn't really work. He went to Denver, played with the best player of the last 5 years in Nikola Jokic, and he just went, right. And I always will respect the sort of player like what Gordon is, who was in a role and tried to do the thing, and then he went to a new team and wasn't like, look at me, I'm a top 5 pick, why aren't I having the ball? He said, bro, let me do the things that I'm good at and let's win, yeah? Because he did. He scaled his usage way back. He stopped taking stupid shots. He finished at the rim. He defended like a crazy person. And his impact is out of control. It's so good. But it doesn't really translate that well to fantasy. 139th in -1, and that takes away the bad free throw shooting. 93rd in points, so he's better there. But the impact that Aaron Gordon has for this Nuggets team is something that, like, obviously is not captured in fantasy stats. Gordon was 49th overall this year in EPM. Last year in Denver, he was 24th. That's borderline All-Star, which he did start to get some buzz for the All-Star game last season. He didn't deserve it. He shouldn't have been an All-Star, but he was playing that well, playing the role. DPM has him 35th and Drip has him 46th. That is a consensus, according to those impact metrics, top 50 NBA player. Fantasy, we probably don't touch him at all in category leagues. Points leagues, we do consider him around round 9, I guess. But that's a big disconnect. If the Nuggets don't have Aaron Gordon, that would mean we get to see Peyton Watson in that role, which, who knows? But they would be nowhere near as good. They wouldn't be. You don't replace what Aaron Gordon does with his size, with his switchability defensively, with his cutting, his jumping, his connection with Jokic. He can pass a little bit as well. You just can't really easily replace that stuff. But it doesn't translate across to fantasy at all. Well, no, well, that's true, because he's not really a draftable category league, standard league guy. Yet, if we sat down all GMs and they got to pick for this season coming up which player they want, 12 teams, 12-team league, he's coming in round 4. Easily. He fits what you need. The shooting can be iffy. He's not going to be a usage player anymore. Like, again, change that part of his game. If I have a look at Aaron Gordon's usage numbers, it used to be 24 at its peak in Orlando. 24. He was down to 17 this year. His shooting numbers in Orlando last season were 55. True shooting, 55. Effective field goal, 52. This last season, 61 true shooting, 58 effective. Like, insane efficiency jump by just taking better shots. And it's not like he's hitting his shots all that highly, like mid-ranges at 27%. That's obviously horrific, but all he does is just finish at the rim. It helps you play with Jokic, and he could have been much better. He only hit 29% from 3 this season. But he just is good. He doesn't even generate big defensive stats. His steal and block percentages are very low. 225th in the NBA in block percentage. 322nd in steal percentage. He's never had a season, if I look back at all those numbers, where he's been in the top 100 of steal or block percentage in the NBA. Never. Yet he's widely considered one of the best defenders in the NBA. 28th in defensive EPM this season, 22nd last season. He's really ramped that part of his game up, and that is what we talk about when we talk about who's awesome in real life and is underrated, but is just an afterthought in fantasy. And Big Az, he's one of them. I had a few different options that I was going to use for the fifth player here, and I was going to actually use his teammate. Well, not Aaron Gordon's teammate, the next player's teammate. We're going to Sacramento. I was going to talk about Keegan Murray, but Keegan Murray, I think's fantasy game was probably a little bit too close to his overall impact stats to count. His impact stats were better than his fantasy stats. But Keon Ellis is a player who was on a two-way contract, even to like in his first season and then to start last season. Outplayed Davion Mitchell, got the backup point guard role, got converted to a full-time contract, and then replaced Kevin Huerter as a starter. He was inconsistent. That's not debatable. We saw that he would have games where he would shoot unbelievably. He would have games where he would struggle. But towards the end of the year, he found a consistent role and his impact was through the roof. Now, where he goes from here, I don't know. They obviously traded away Davion Mitchell, but they drafted Devin Carter, who ostensibly could play the same position as Keon. Now, the difference here is that Devin Carter's 6'2" without shoes. Keon's like 6'5", 6'6". Big size difference. Not really sure where Huerter fits into all this. So would Ellis get the initial crack at being the starter? Probably. And he had some moments of being a 12-team fantasy guy, mainly on the back of steals and threes, but it was inconsistent. But overall, for the year, he finished 244th in -1 and 305th in points leagues. There's just no volume there. But the impact stats, well, that's a different story, isn't it? 80th on EPM. 80th. Like, they are very high numbers. Should I have 80th? Yeah, let's say 80th. He was 33rd in defensive EPM. 116th on Darko. 106th on Drip. This is like a very comfortable, according to those impact stats, a very comfortable NBA starter. Only a 12 usage guy, but 62 true shooting on 42% from three. Steal rate, 38th best steal rate in the NBA. He generates defensive events. He defends well. He shot well on low volume. Not sure how much of this can continue, and he is already 24 and a half. But just one of those guys that when we look at him and go, well, they took Devin Carter at 13. Devin Carter was a great rebounder at college, and he's probably going to take that spot. And I thought that was a decent chance as well. But we have got a very clear example on this roster of a guy who was considered to be NBA ready, who was taken with the 13th pick in a draft that was a little bit weaker than usual. And he's terrible. And that's Chris Duarte. Now, Chris Duarte is already 50 years old, so there's a little bit of a difference, and he should never have been picked at 13. And he's nowhere near the same player that Devin Carter is. I wouldn't have touched Duarte. I think I had him 21st or something in that draft. Wouldn't have touched him in the lottery at all. And I clowned on that pick as soon as it happened. Carter could have easily gone much higher than this, but this draft class is weaker. So Ellis actually has some runs on the board, and we can't sit here and go, well, yeah, but like, they invested this pick in Carter and Ellis is a two-way and they don't really care. Teams use a bunch of advanced stats, whether they use EPM or Darko or Drip, I've got no idea. They probably don't. They have a lot of in-house metrics, but a lot of the people that create these metrics get hired by teams. You heard me talking with Kevin Pelton a few weeks ago about Lane Vashro, who started a lot of this stuff. And, you know, along with Kevin, who's one of the initial advanced stats people at Basketball Prospectus, Lane was hired by the Nuggets. Jacob Goldstein invented what was at the time the Goldstein standard, all-in-one metric, PIPM. And the Wizards said, thanks, you're coming to work with me. So, there's been a lot of studies on these numbers, and Darko and EPM have constantly come out as the top two, along with RAPM, which I don't really use much. It's a little bit harder to get a hold of that, and it's like a 3-year multi-process thing. It's a little bit harder to find that stuff. They're the more accurate advanced numbers. So teams have whatever they use. They have ways of assessing this. They'll know how good Keon Ellis actually was last season. So where those minutes lie at all. But yeah, for fantasy, we'll just go, well, Huerter's going to be there. And obviously Huerter and Monk were out at the end of last season, meaning Ellis got to do more. So Herter and Monk are both there still currently. They drafted Devin Carter, so I'm not going to touch Keon Ellis in the draft, not even get close to it. But that impact's crazy. That's perfect, much like the Gordon fit is perfect next to Porter, Jokic, and Murray. Ellis fitting next to Fox and Sabonis and Murray, it works pretty well. And Carter's got a lot to live up to, and he's got to make up for 3.5 inches in height as well. Let's just go through to 5 other names that I wanted to mention. Because the first name on this list is Amen Thompson. Now, I didn't include him as one of the main players on this show because I think we all feel really confident that Amen is going to be actually awesome at fantasy. In fact, this season, Amen Thompson played 22 minutes a night in 61 games. He had an ankle injury that cost him early on. But he only played 22 minutes a night. He's a backup. He's probably going to be a backup again this season. But despite all of that, Amen in 22 minutes, and despite shooting, do you know what the number is? Guess what he shot from 3? 14%. 14. Despite shooting those numbers and playing only 22 minutes a night, and playing only 61 games in, say, straight 9-cat totals, 146th. In per game -1, Amen was 135th in 22 minutes a night. If this man becomes a 30% three-point shooter and plays 35 minutes, he will be a top 25 guy. Think Lonzo Ball. Lonzo was an elite fantasy player before the injury. Think Lonzo Ball, but I think better, way better. And as a rookie, for Amen Thompson to be, like, he's in the 84th percentile for overall EPM as a rookie. 84th percentile as a rookie. Like, that is crazy. No, not even, sorry, not 84th percentile, my bad. 84th overall ranked player in EPM in the NBA. Like, that, they are not normal numbers. That's not a normal number for a rookie. Drip loved him. Drip had Amen at number 50. Darko, again, which usually really hates rookies, had Amen at, God, I hate to even think where he is. It's bloody high. Actually, 131st there. But he's going to be way up. Just watch him. Ken Murphy III, Trey Murphy. Again, didn't include him because Will saw that when the minutes are there, he can be awesome for fantasy. But they're not there. But he's still an unbelievably valuable player. Just someone to watch that maybe a lot of you know how good he is, but not everyone does. And if the Pelicans moved on from Brandon Ingram and started Trey Murphy, there are very easy and clear arguments that they will be a better team. They might not be, but there are arguments you can make. And I think a lot of people would go, what are you talking about? Brandon Ingram averages 25, 5, and 5. You're crazy. Trey averages 14 points. But nah, he's really good. Lou Dort. I'm not a big Lou Dort guy, as you're well aware. I think that Lou Dort eventually is going to lose a starting spot. I don't think he's going to remain a starter long term. I don't. But Lou Dort, in the last 2 years, has been a top 110 ranked EPM player. And in fantasy, barely cracks the top 200. What is he last year? 173rd, 186th in points. Although, laughably, for Yahoo 9-cat totals, 93rd, which we're never touching Lou Dort in those spots. But overall, impact-wise, great. And then I want to talk about 2 unheralded young players in Memphis whose advanced stats show up like crazy. Scottie Pippen Jr. and Vince Williams Jr. I was hoping that they would go into the season with Vince Williams as a starter, and they might end up doing that if they find a way to move off of Marcus Smart or they bring Marcus Smart as a backup. I wanted them to play Vince at the 4, Jaren at the 5, Brandon Clark in there, but now they've got Zach Edey, that's probably less likely. I think eventually when they do move on from Smart, that's going to mean bigger opportunity for Scott Pippen, bigger opportunity for Vince Williams. Both of these guys' impact numbers were great. And there were times when both of them had some real fantasy value too. But it is important to see that their actual impact defensively, offensively, passing-wise, outstrip some of that fantasy value. And they're just guys that when we look at this Grizzlies team, I think they're being a bit underrated at the moment, Memphis. I'm still a bit worried about where Zach Edey, how he fits and all that sort of stuff, but whatever. I think they can still be good without him. Even if Zach doesn't work out as a rookie big man and he struggles defensively, they just run Vince and they run Clark and they run Jaren. And then they put all these other players out there who are really good. And hopefully, no minutes for Zaire Williams. But Vince and Scotty, big numbers, good production. And that's the end of the Underrated show. The next show you'll get from me will be me live back in Australia. Fresh out of Summer League. And Summer League won't be finished. I won't be recapping it, but I don't know what we'll talk about. We'll talk about some stuff. So in the meantime, hit the thumbs up and leave your comments down below. Follow, subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.